right, it's 2 o'clock. I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Katie Monahan, and I'm a communications strategist here at the Ohio Arts Council, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Best Practices for Accessible Virtual and Hybrid Programming. So I will introduce our presenters here in just a minute, but there are, of course, just a few housekeeping items to go over first. So everyone tuning in today is in listen-only mode. This just helps to cut down on any feedback issues during the presentation. But if you do have a question at any point, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A box there in your control panel. We'll monitor those throughout the webinar, and we'll leave plenty of time to answer them at the end as well. And I know our presenters today also plan on utilizing the chat, so be sure you have that window open too. Next, live captioning is available for today's webinar, and you can access those captions by clicking on the closed captioning icon and selecting Show Subtitle. If you have audio issues or trouble connecting, we recommend refreshing your browser. And if that doesn't work, try logging off and then logging back in. And also, please keep in mind that because we are presenting from separate locations, there may be some variations in bandwidth and internet stability. So if the sound fluctuates or one of us freezes up for a second, thank you in advance for bearing with us. I promise we will keep on rolling through any of those issues. And finally, we are recording today's webinar, and the recording will be available on our webinars page at oac.ohio.gov/webinars and on our YouTube channel by early next week. All right, and that does it for housekeeping. So next, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our friends from Art Possible Ohio, Molly Cairney and Megan Fitze. Art Possible Ohio is the statewide service organization on the arts and disability. They work with artists of all ages who have disabilities to make arts and cultural experiences more accessible and inclusive. So they are the perfect folks to have with us today to talk about their experiences over the past 16 months or so with virtual and hybrid events. And they're going to also provide us with some takeaways and best practices we can employ with our events moving forward. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Megan and Molly. Thanks for being here, you guys. Take it from here.
Thank you so much, Katie. We are so excited to be here today. So the way this is going to work today is I'm going to introduce you all to Art Possible Ohio, do a brief intro, and then I'm going to talk a lot about some quick and easy things you can do in your marketing, as well as your programming, to make them more accessible. Once I'm done gabbing at you all, Molly's going to take over, talk a little bit about COVID precautions, as well as throw some scenarios and questions at you. We'll probably be speaking pretty quickly, but we'll try to keep it interesting for you. And as Katie mentioned, this video is being recorded, so hopefully you can revisit if you need to, feel like you missed anything. You can also reach out to us at any time. I'll share our emails at the end of the program. So to get started today, I'm going to do a little best practice for you by describing the slide in front of you. One thing that you can do for those with low vision or people who are blind when you are presenting webinars or PowerPoints or anything visual, virtually or in person, is you can describe what is happening on the screen or in front of you to the best of your ability. So right now, those of you who are looking at the slides, it is our Art Possible Ohio logo, which is essentially a white P made out of arrows within a purple circle and then a pinkish circle around that. Next to that, it says Art Possible Ohio, again in those pink and purple colors. And under that, it says Making Creativity Accessible. My name is Megan Fitze, and I am the Director of Programs for Art Possible Ohio. I'm a white woman with dark curly hair, pink glasses, big white earrings, and I'm wearing a blue blouse with polka dots today. I do a lot of our public-facing programs, like our annual Real Abilities Film Festival and our annual exhibition, Accessible Expressions Ohio, and then some one-off careers in the arts professional development trainings. Molly, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself before we move on?
Thanks, Megan. I just had to quickly unmute. I'm Molly Cairney. I'm the Executive Director of Art Possible Ohio, and I do most of the behind the scenes work for our organization, which includes working with our board of directors, doing most of the development and grant writing, and then also overseeing our Teaching Artists in Schools program, which is currently in about 10 to 15 schools around the state of Ohio, providing arts integrated instruction for students who are in inclusive classrooms. And by inclusive, we mean classrooms that have students with disabilities that range from physical to cognitive to IEPs, and students who are what is called typically developing students. I am a white woman with shoulder length brownish red curly hair. I am wearing sort of a purple V-neck sweater. And I'm sitting in a room. Behind me is a gray wall with lots of artwork on it. And that is me.
Thank you, Molly. Oop. All right, so Katie already read our mission, which is really great. So I don't have to waste time doing that. And Molly and I covered some of the programs we do. Another thing that we do is cultural access trainings, which is essentially what we're doing right now, where we offer support and professional development training to cultural organizations around the state of Ohio. And now I want to kind of cover why accessibility matters to us, why we think it should matter to you, before I get into kind of our quick and easy things you can do to make your work that you do more accessible. So finally, we have new data from the census. I used to have a stat that was from 2010, and I'm so excited that I was able to update it, although this stat technically comes from the CDC site, which is everybody's favorite website right now. But nearly 1 in 4 people, according to the 2020 U.S. Bureau Census reports, have a disability, which essentially means if we multiply this across the world, assuming that this is across the whole globe, 20 to 25% of the world's population, over 1 billion people in the world, have a disability. So that's quite a chunk of people that you should be potentially considering when you are planning any kind of program or anything associated with your organization. 25% is a pretty hefty statistic. Another reason that we think accessibility matters is because, well, technically it's the law. The Americans Disabilities Act, which was ratified in 1990, is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including cultural spaces. So basically, access is a civil right that we ask you to consider for people in your organization. We also believe that accessible programming and offerings is really smart business sense. Prior to contrary belief, people with disabilities have money and they want to spend it. So if you're thinking about your donor pool, you're thinking about tickets you want to sell, you're thinking about memberships, make sure that you are including people with disabilities and that potential income. Also, when people come to your programs, they often bring friends, and those friends have spending power as well. So we don't want to discount that kind of potential growth, monetary growth for your organization. We think that accessibility benefits everyone. If we think about it, we are all aging every day. At some point, most of us are probably going to develop a mobility issue. I already wear corrective lenses, and no doubt my eyesight is going to get worse as I age. It's a very good chance I'm going to have hearing aids one day based on my family history. So when we're thinking about our offerings to the public and the public good that we can provide, we're really planning for our future selves. We also need to consider that at any point any of us could develop a disability. I could get up and trip over a rug right here in my living room and break my arm. And guess what? I won't be able to drive. It'll be harder for me to type. I will have a temporary disability. So we need to really consider that when we are thinking about our public and who we want to be at the table. And then finally, you know, we're all different and we're all different kinds of learners. We're all multimodal learners. And so when we make things accessible and we allow people to engage with what we have to offer in different ways, we're really benefiting more people. We're all different types of learners, and it really gives us another dimension of learning. So just some quick reasons that we think you should be considering accessibility. As far as Art Possible Ohio, there are a few principles that we stand behind. We believe that the lack of access for those with disabilities is a systemic problem. People are disabled by design. This is often called a social model versus a medical model. And one of the best ways I can explain this is using this image that's on the screen here. In this image, there is a gentleman with a white shirt and khaki pants pushing a person who uses a wheelchair who is also wearing like a khaki shirt and dark pants. And he's pushing him right in front of a storefront. And looking at this image, Molly and I would say the reason that this person in this wheelchair cannot get into that store has nothing to do with the fact that this person uses a wheelchair, but it has everything to do with the fact that there's not a ramp provided for this person who has a wheelchair that they use to get around. Another really important principle that we stand by at Art Possible Ohio is that understanding intersectionality is key to creating good access. If you are someone who identifies in multiple categories of systematic oppression, you're likely to be up against a brick wall, lots of brick walls. And so then understanding how different identities interlink with each other is really key to creating better access overall. We also believe that access is an aesthetic, not an afterthought. It's something that you should be considering before you plan anything, before you build anything, before you hire anybody. And so it's really essential that you sit down before you create anything and consider who is at the table. And if folks with disabilities are not at the table, we just ask you to consider why before moving forward. Okay, so let's get to work. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about marketing, and I'm going to talk about it in terms of print materials. The best things that you can do to make your materials more visually appealing for folks with low vision or who perhaps have other disabilities like dyslexia. So please, 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 whenever you can, and please, please, please always use sans serif fonts when you are creating marketing materials. Arial is one of the best, but certainly we understand aesthetics. There are lots of really beautiful sans serif fonts out there. You can simply Google them to find one that suits your needs. I see lots of beautiful titles and logos created for exhibitions and playbells and gallery spaces, but often I'm cringing because they are, while beautiful fonts, they might not be accessible. They're italicized writing. They have lots of curly cues. I'm often looking at my phone and I just can't read what the font says because of the closed space letters and of the extra curls and flourishes in the font. So please consider sans serif when you are creating materials. Use a good color contrast ration. It makes your content easier to read, break out that color wheel. And then we also suggest that when you're considering text, you please use at least size 12 and if possible 14, so that the font is a bit larger and easier to read. We understand that this might mean you put less text on something, but actually for someone with dyslexia or other disabilities, this actually makes what you are providing in terms of text simpler to read and more digestible. For any kind of marketing material that you put on a website or on a print material, please consider using an accessibility icon. At the bottom of the screen, I have about 12 different examples of accessibility icons that you can throw on there, and someone who is seeking accommodations, when they look at your marketing materials, they will know right away that something is provided for them. They won't even have to reach out and ask for it. They won't have to worry about it, and it will increase the likelihood of them engaging with your organization. There are some really cool contemporary designs out there. Again, I know I'm telling you to Google a lot, but I just want to know that, let you know that this information is at your fingertips. And I think that you could find something that appeals to you. Most of these icons are free and downloadable. You can even take a crack at creating your own as long as it is similar to the original icon that you find. But again, we encourage to use these whenever possible. When you are creating a website or sending emails or creating social media content, please use clear directives. And what I mean by that is text that explains explicitly what to do. So for example, if you're creating a social media post that links to a website, a ticket registration link or something similar, you should always frame the words like this. To register for this event, click the following link or click the link below. That way someone who has low vision or who is blind knows exactly where to go to click that link to gather the information that they need. I also have an example from our website, our Possible Ohio website, about how to register for our newsletter. There's an image down at the bottom right hand of the screen that says, stay connected and join our online newsletter, eVoices. Type in your email address below. Underneath that, there's a box. Someone knows exactly where to type in their email address. And then beneath that, there's a button that says, click here to submit. The text is written on the button so that someone knows exactly where to click in order to submit their email. In terms of marketing, market to the audience you seek. Never expect people to come to you, never plan a program and think, okay, I have audio description for this production, but nobody who needed it came, so we're not going to use audio description anymore. It was a waste of time and resources. Find organizations in your area to support you and help market, and then partner with them. You don't have to be the expert on everything accessibility. Molly and I would never, ever, ever claim to be experts on everything accessibility. But these organizations and people are the experts on user friendliness, and they can help you plan programs, test them, and market them. All right, so in-person experiences. Above everything, recognize the fact that right now we are still in a pandemic. And so people are still feeling very cautious about going into public spaces. And as cultural organizations, you still might feel very drained, stressed, trying to understand on how to provide the most accessible programming you can for the widest audience. So chill out a little bit, lower your expectations, and be honest about what you have to offer to your audience. Some things you could do that would be not that stressful would be to have special hours or days dedicated to individuals that are immunocompromised, like grocery stores did at the beginning of the pandemic, because individuals with disabilities are more likely to have an underlying medical condition that puts them at risk, which are called comorbidities, if you're not familiar with that term. I just hung an exhibition in a coffee shop. They have sensory Sundays at their coffee shop, which is really great. So on Sundays, they lower the lighting, they turn off the music, they have different tools and things for people to engage with when they come in. That's a really great option for you, just to create more accessible programs for your space. Whenever you can, whether it's a production or a gallery exhibition or something like that, provide audio description, especially if you can't offer Braille guides for exhibits or programs. So an audio description is a verbal description of what you might see in a gallery, a description of each painting or artwork. And if you're producing a play, it would be a description of what is happening on the play. Same if you're showing a film or something like that. Audio descriptions are wonderful because you don't have to be in person to enable them. So you could put the audio description on your website and someone can access it from their home and still engage with what you're offering. But then you can also have them in your space. People can access them maybe via a cell phone, or if you have an iPad, you can offer at the desk, or other kinds of specialized headphones or equipment for audio descriptions that you can offer. They're a really wonderful tool to include and make everything a little bit more accessible, especially for those who have low vision or who are blind. Whenever you can, offer Braille guides or exhibits or programs. There's a wonderful organization called Clover Nook in Cincinnati that loves working with arts organizations and nonprofits. I encourage you to reach out to them for all your Braille needs, because they would be dying to work with you. And they also love creating other kinds of tactile materials. And then whenever you can, have large print materials on hand that can easily be recycled or reprinted. since we are still dealing with a pandemic, or you could laminate them and easily clean them. And then also make sure to have all your text for exhibits or programs in a downloadable form on your website so visitors can view them on their screen readers as they experience your offerings via cell phone or a tablet. As for virtual experiences, there's a lot of quick and easy things you can do to make your marketing quickly much more accessible and more screen reader friendly. I'm going to talk about all of these things in front of you: captioning, transcription, camelbacking hashtags, image description and alt text, sensory friendly offerings, and more about expectations. So captioning and transcription. So on the screen in front of me is Spock, I think, from Star Trek. I'm not a Trekkie, but it's a man with the dark hair, pointed ears, white skin, and a blue suit, with his arms stretched out in front of him, and he's crying. And there's a purple wall behind him, and underneath in the caption it says "sobbing mathematically." It's supposed to be a joke. It's obviously a poorly written or an error caption. So for our virtual guests, it is super important to have captioning for videos or films, or provide transcripts whenever you can. It really supports people with hearing loss, people in sound sensitive environments, and it also can help people focus. So whenever you can, hire someone who can do live captioning, because that is the best and most accurate way to provide captioning for someone who might need it. Understanding that some of us produce a lot of video content or do a lot of virtual webinars and things like that, understanding that budget can be an issue. There are a few things you can do. Right now Zoom even comes with audio generated captioning. Facebook video has auto captioning. You can upload your video, turn on the captions, and you can edit them. And then another quick and easy hack is to create a YouTube page if your organization doesn't have one already. You just simply get the YouTube account, upload the videos. They're going to auto generate those captions. You can go in and edit them to make sure that they are correct. You can also provide transcripts of everything that's said on your website and social media. And you can even upload transcripts to YouTube to accompany the videos. There are some software that you can get that connects to your Zoom videos, like Otter AI or Rev, and they have functions that will create transcripts for you as well. And those are pretty affordable, about $20 a month right now. I'd love to know of any more, if anybody else found successful ones that they've used. Molly and I have been working with those for about a year now. Another easy thing to do, and please do this because it's so easy. And then I will see organizations that I know just heard from Molly and I and learned about this, and they're still not doing it. So please do this. It's one of my favorite things. All you have to do is Camelback your hashtags for social media. So anytime you use a hashtag in social media, capitalize each word of your hashtag. This is called camelbacking because it makes it so much easier to read for everyone, but including individuals with dyslexia or other reading disorders. You can prevent silly things, like every year we have a day of arts that we celebrate. And if we didn't camelback our hashtags, it could very easily read Day of Farts. So you want to kind of avoid things like that. So this is one of the simplest things that you can do to make your social media postings a little bit more accessible. The hashtags still work the same. If you click on them, they go to all the other hashtags that are the same, get you more of that content you're looking for. Also on social media, on your websites, please always use alt text or image descriptions for any image that you are providing on your website. So these are functions that are built into social media and all of your websites. I'm positive, 100% positive. So it's something you just do on the back end, but alt text is technically written copy that appears in place of an image. It's what screen readers pick up instead of an image. So anybody who's using a screen reader, if they're scrolling or they're looking at their website, they're going to read that text instead of picking up the image, of course. You can find ways to provide alt text for YouTube, social media platforms. You can Google how to do this if you don't already know how to do this, but it's fairly simple just by playing around with the apps on your phone or on your computers. And the image in front of you today is, I have an image description, so I'll read it right to you. People descending a spiraling ramp with bright red walls. It's an image I sourced from the New York Times article about accessibility in New York State. And then I also have 2 black squares, just that shows you what writing alt text looks like on Instagram, and then a sample of the image description underneath that. I don't think I talked about what an image description was in relation to alt text. So if you can't get in on that back end and you can't provide that alt text for that image, a quick and easy hack is to include an image description just in the copy that you're already providing. So if you're making a social media post, at the bottom of your post, you would just simply put image description and then describe the image. Same if you're building a website or something like that, you could just include the image description in the regular copy that you are sharing with everyone. These are some best practices for writing alt text and image description. Try to keep descriptions under 200 words. 200 words is a lot, so that shouldn't be too difficult. Include numbers or text and images. Try not to duplicate information that be in the caption or somewhere else near the image. Don't worry about tints, just be consistent. And for all of our, art galleries out there, art museums, for abstract images, begin at the top left-hand corner and work your way across the image, left to right, top to bottom. How are we doing on time? Do we want to have folks practice an image description activity? Okay, so this is where we're going to ask you to engage a little bit. We have in front of us a wood burning. This is part of our annual Accessible Expressions Ohio exhibition. It's called Growing with Time by Lancaster artist Brandon Muck. He actually got second place for our emerging category this year. And what I want you to do right now is to take a minute, consider this artwork in front of you, and throw out an image description for us in the chat box.
Hey, Megan, while we're waiting for folks to type in their description, we do have a question. Someone was asking if you can repeat the directionality in writing an image description for that more abstract artwork.
Sure. It's just left to right, top to bottom. I probably overread the rule for it. So just start at the top left, go to the right, and then work your way down. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong chat box. There we go. All right. Is anyone gonna share? Oh, yes.
Looks like Robert had a...
So Robert wrote, this is an urban farmer using some farm equipment and some simple, maybe hand tools. And I think that's a good start. I would also probably try to give some perspective on maybe what's in the foreground, what's in the midground, what's in the background. And when you can, use color. Sometimes describing the medium, which I know you can't really tell from this, is helpful. 2 farmers harvesting crops on a sparse field with a green tractor and red farmhouses. I like that for a quick and easy one if you're just trying to get it done, right? Oh, these are so wonderful. You're all writers. You're just doing a great job. Rectangular image, that's very technical. I appreciate that, Kate. Illustration featuring farmers working in a field. In the center of the foreground, a man crouches to tend the field. To his left, viewer's right, woo, she's good, is a woman who also crouching in a purple dress. Image is mainly brown, but also features bright colors such as the green of the plains, reds, yellows, and farm buildings in the background. Exemplary. These are all wonderful. So I can't read them all. We don't have time, but I think you got it. So no one needs to worry about it. You can do this. And so now you have no excuse not to. That's, you got it. Again, Kate's going to share this out. So if you need those rules, you know, you can access them again. You can also, I'm going to say it again, you can Google it. You can Google how to do this. And if you need to create guidelines for other folks in your organization, you can create your own set of guidelines to share out. All right, moving on. Sensory friendly programs. This really applies to in-person and virtual programs, but I know a lot of people are curious on how do you create sensory friendly virtual programs, right? So really, this is all about prep work for individuals who have sensory processing disorders or who are neurodivergent and just need to know what's going to happen before they experience something. Send as much material ahead of time on how to navigate your program. So there is something called social stories, which many of you may already be familiar with. It's technically a licensed term, but is essentially images of what people are going to see before they arrive at your program or at your space. So if you're going to a museum, perhaps it is an image of where the parking lot is, the pathway to your front door, what your front door looks like, how to get to the front desk, then how to get to the program space, what the classroom is going to look like, and maybe some of the tools that are going to happen, you know, an image of what tools you're going to use while you're in the program. Same for virtual. Maybe send some screenshots of how to register for the program, how you get into the Zoom or streaming platform that you're going to use, what the screen's going to be like. Is it going to be webinar form like this, or everybody's face is going to be in front of you? How many slides there are going to be? Can you send the slides ahead of time? How long is everything going to be? As much information as you can provide ahead of time is going to help people prepare so that they can bring resources that they may need to be more comfortable in your program, or so that they just really know what to expect when they get to. Set program expectations. Let folks know if they can talk, if they're going to be expected to talk, if there's going to be music, if there's going to be images, so that they can, you know, just like mentally prepare for what they're going to experience. And then for ongoing programs, serial programs, whenever you can, have elements that are repetitive, like an opening and a closing activity, so that they can come to expect that and feel more comfortable every time they visit your space. So maybe that's an opening song. Maybe that's a silly game that you play every time. Maybe that's simply how you order everything that you're going to do. First, we're going to do A, then we're going to do B, and then we're going to do C. That really gives people a sense of ownership and of expectation. And then finally, expectations and risk taking. In your marketing, be very clear about what accessibility features are offered, as well as the goal of your program. So again, be honest about what you can offer. If you can offer reasonable accommodation, things like ASL or live captioning, and people need to let you know ahead of time that they need that, make sure that's very clear in your marketing, on your website and your social media and things like that. And then finally, just don't be afraid to try new things. The world is not back to where it was, and I don't know if it ever will be. So continue to take risks. I think that's like part of our job, right? In the cultural world, like we're always supposed to be taking risks, but just don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to fail. We recently offered a ukulele workshop online while the instructor was traveling across the country and going to be in a different campground every day. We had no idea how it was going to go. And it was wonderful. And there was even a concert at the end of it. So you never know how things are going to work out. You might be surprised. And at the end of the day, the whole goal is to, you know, continue trying to make things better for everybody who wants to engage with your offerings. Now I'm going to turn things over to Molly. If we have questions, I'm happy to take them, but I'm going to move on to the next slide.
So we did have one question. It looks like Aaron asked, I missed a point on one of the recent slides. Did you say that tense is or is not important for captioning images? And I would say it's it's not important as long as it's consistent.
Yes.
So like, don't switch tenses around, because then it becomes difficult to sort of read and make sense of. And another thing I'll note, and Megan and I did it at the top of our presentation, but if you're going to mention the skin tone of one image, you need to mention the skin tone of all images, so that we're not considering people of color to be other. Because a lot of times we'll say, like, if someone were to describe me, they would say a woman with brown hair, but one of my Black colleagues, they would describe them as a Black woman with black hair. And that reinforces this idea that Black is somehow different or other or not, quote, normal. So another thing you could consider too is mentioning that people are able-bodied. So able-bodied person or person standing with person who is a wheelchair user, and remembering to do that person first language. So that question just sort of like reminded me of that.
That's good. That's really great.
Thanks so much, Megan. Now what we want to do, and we're going to ask you to get into that chat box again, which I was like pumped to see so many really wonderful image descriptions. It really is trying to like paint a word picture almost. Like, think about that as you're writing your image description. And if it is an artwork, make sure you mention that it's an artwork. If it's a photograph, it helps to mention that it's a photograph, just so that whoever is using the image description can have a very clear idea of what it is that they are encountering. So now let's talk a little bit about accessible event planning, and then talking about it in the context of COVID. Unfortunately, we are not out of the COVID times, even though a lot of us are vaccinated. Young children still are not eligible to be vaccinated. And there are a lot of people who have comorbidities or disabilities who may not be able to be vaccinated for medical reasons. So we need to sort of always be keeping in mind that in addition to being accessible, we need to be extra safe. So this activity came about because I had the experience of early in the pandemic listening to some phone calls. My husband works for the Ohio Department of Health, and he had a gentleman call him who was blind and used a cane, one of the white canes that you've probably seen that people who are blind or who have low sight use to orient themselves physically in space. And he was saying that he was sort of calling as his last resort to the call center helpline, and basically saying all of the cues for being COVID responsible: social distancing, where to find hand sanitizer, how to move through space, like directionally, because stores were having people go in one door and exit another door. All of it is visual. And as someone who is blind, that's a real challenge for me because I can't see any of these things. And he said he sort of reached his limit of patience when he was at the bank and bumped into one of the rope partitions that they had set up in order to direct walking traffic. And it was at a time when, as we all remember, people's emotions were sort of high and heightened. And he said it was just frustrating because he wasn't trying to be difficult. He just literally could not see where to go and how to be responsible in the space. And so we immediately jumped on it and we were like, oh, are there ways that we can create these types of resources? And there's nothing out there. And this is pretty typical. Whenever we have a situation where reaction time has to be quick, oftentimes people with disabilities are not the first population that we think of. So that actually puts all of you in a really nice position today, because you have this brain space right now to be really proactive and think about accessibility in the context of COVID in your spaces and in your programming. So the challenge that Megan and I are going to pose to you today, and we'll have you do a little bit of writing about it, is consider an event, either one that you used to have or that you've been testing out, or that you imagine you might want to have in the future, that is COVID-19 responsible, proactively accessible, and engages your audience in a potentially weird, outlandish, or unexpected way. We are an arts organization, after all. We like to tread that line. So one great example of that for us was we had a concert recently that was a Facebook Live concert with Blue Spectrum, and they are a band that has the lead member is on the autism spectrum, and I believe one or two other of the musicians have disabilities. And typically what we would do for this type of event is maybe like a panel discussion or something kind of like more mundane. But Megan was like, you know what, it's the end of the year, I want to do a rock concert. And so I was like, awesome, let's figure out how to do a rock concert. So think for a few minutes about programs that you have in your life right now and how you might want to address these three areas to make a really interesting program. It can be virtual, it can be hybrid, it can be in person, since some of us are emerging back out into the world and going to in-person programming, and write a little bit about what the program would be, what types of precautions you would take, how you would make it accessible, and how you would make it really fun and engaging and potentially kind of weird. And in the meantime, we will wait for all of the genius ideas to roll in. I'll also encourage anyone who has an accessibility COVID conundrum, something that you've been trying to figure out, feel free to drop that in the chat box. One conversation we had recently at a site was, how do I do a touch tour in the era of COVID? I have a colleague who works for Girl Scouts of Ohio's Heartland, and one of her responsibilities is planning archery events and events like that. And the question is, how do you sanitize a bow and arrow? How do you make a bow and arrow useful or usable? How can you hack it for someone who might not have the same fine motor skills or arm strength that would be required to pull back that bow? Are there ways to sort of help that along if you're working with someone who might have mobility limitations? And then another thing I would encourage you to do is to think about programming at all levels of your museum. So a lot of times when we think about programming, we think about the education or the learning department, and how do we make those programs accessible? We think about tours, touch tours, and audio tours and things like that, bringing in ASL interpreters. But I would encourage you also to think about donor events and galas and events that we don't always think about when we think about accessibility. A lot of our donors are older. A lot of them do have mobility issues or mobility concerns. They may have low vision or low hearing. And so how do we make those donor events more accessible and easier for people to be engaged with? And then finally, think about things like internal events. I'm vamping as I wait for ideas to come in. Again, we don't always have to think in a forward-facing way. A lot of us would love to have more people that work in our organizations who have disabilities, because their perspectives are so valid and they help us design events, design programming, design internal policies that are more inclusive and better for everyone that works there. So think about how internal programming, internal events, internal professional development can be adapted and made to be more accessible. Oh, Kimberly's got one. I'm going to go ahead and read hers out loud. A few of these as again, another accessibility best practice. So Kimberly says, you're invited to an exciting book fair celebration. There will be an opportunity to view a list of book titles and authors online. You'll be able to pre-order books and view a map of the pop-up sale occurring in an accessible event hall. There will be a schedule and display of the author table placement in our online app, and you'll be able to map your route from author to author if you'd like autographs. So things that are cool about this, it looks like it has a really robust online component, which is great in the era of COVID because it keeps people on their own device and it keeps people from having to like pass pieces of paper back and forth, which can cause the transmission of viruses. Online stuff is also really great for things like sensory friendly. Megan was talking about social stories, having a map I can look at ahead of time, knowing what the expectations are before I get there and how I'm going to be able to navigate a space reduces so much anxiety. And again, we talk a lot about universal design at Art Possible Ohio. It reduces anxiety for everyone. So I have people in my household who do not have sensory sensitivities, but they do have anxiety when they go to a new place and they want to know, like, where do I get my ticket? What is the expectation going to be of my behavior? How can I be sure that I'm like fitting into this space in the way that is expected of me so that I'm not embarrassed or I don't feel anxious or I get to a place and I can't find the bathroom. All of that stuff is good for just everyone. And then I also like that there's still the option to have some person-to-person interaction so that we can do things like get our author autographs and move through a physical space. We're having a street, yard, and garage sale in our neighborhood to accommodate disabilities. Vendors are on the ground level. They will use music infused with announcements and instructions. Items will be organized by familiar categories and salespersons will give audible description and question visitors on their interests. Nice. I like that things are on ground level. We think about things like different levels, physical levels, as it relates to disability. But again, with that universal design, that's also helpful for children and also for people who are just shorter in stature. Museums historically have hung artwork at what an average man's eye line would be, which is real unfortunate for all of us average ladies out there who maybe aren't quite so tall and would also like to see the artwork. So we always encourage museums to hang artwork at a lower level, a more neutral eye line level, because it helps out everyone who is just a little bit shorter than that traditional taller eye line. Also, the idea of having multiple modalities to connect to the information. So verbal announcements, as well as audible descriptions. And then the thing that I think also gets lost sometimes is that person-to-person connection. So giving audible descriptions and questioning visitors on their interests. There is a lot that can be done for accessibility simply by communicating one-on-one. So, for example, if you have someone who works at your front desk and they encounter someone who uses American Sign Language, rather than like panic because I don't know sign language, I don't know how to communicate with this person, pass them a piece of paper and sort of like write down, like, I'm so sorry, I don't know ASL, can we communicate via writing? Empower the people that work in your organizations to come up with solutions on the spot and be proactive. And also let them know that they're not going to, quote, get in trouble for potentially doing the not most right thing. So as long as they are approaching a situation with really good customer service skills, with a positive learning mindset, and in a way where they're using best practices of people first language and just trying to be helpful, they should have the power and the agency to try to solve those problems. Golf outing fundraiser, interpreters present for those who might need them, clear descriptions of events that will take place, map of the facilities distributed prior to the event, optional sensory bags offered prior to the event, very nice, and mobility assistance offered. So these are all really good things that seem like little extras, but they're really kind of necessary for some people in order to fully enjoy and feel present in the experience. The other thing, Megan mentioned that people with disabilities have the capacity to purchase tickets. We often kind of discount their disposable income. People with disabilities also have money to donate to organizations. We have people that serve on our board who have disabilities, and they are some of our best and most consistent financial contributors. So if you're an organization that highlights disability as sort of like your superpower, that's going to make you really appealing for all the right reasons to a potential donor who might have a disability or might have someone in their family who has a disability. So consider that putting yourself out there as a super accessible organization is also going to have additional benefits, like people who are more committed to your mission. And then the other thing we also like to say is make it as obvious as possible. So Megan talked about using all those icons in your marketing. Another thing we encourage people to do is to be really transparent about when they're being accessible and using accessibility best practices. So if you're an organization that produces like a member magazine, for example, on the back of that magazine or in a sort of a little caption somewhere, put a note that says something about accessibility or an accessibility statement. This magazine uses a 12-point font, a sans serif font, high contrast imagery, because these three things are things that are accessibility best practices. It doesn't have to be a big, long manifesto, but just something to call out like, hey, we're doing the work. We're always trying to be better. And then sort of underscoring for people who might not have thought about it before, like, hey, I wonder why this other organization has such teeny tiny font that I can't read. Maybe I should mention to them that a 12-point font is closer to the standard. So little things like that can go a long way to getting that message across. It looks like we have about 5 to 7 minutes left. Let's go ahead and open up the floor to just general questions. Oh, yoga classes. Okay, so we offer yoga classes at Uptown Green Park. Instructor is ready and willing to adjust the class for all mobility levels. We can make flyers with class info available virtually with a schedule, around the circle, introductions, yoga, and that's the schedule, and be specific about where in the park the class meets and what COVID precautions are being taken. Yeah, more information is more clearly written information is always, always better.
And I would say, and I realize if you're selling yoga classes for ticketing, that this could be a challenge, but it's also something that you could make really accessible by making it a hybrid event, because it's super easy to put a camera or an iPhone on an instructor and make that program also virtual. You could certainly do that with a private link and sell a ticket through Eventbrite if you need that, the monetary attachment to the registrant. So I know that's a little bit more work, but once you have it in place, then it's like, this is how we do it. So just something to consider for individuals who are homebound or who just don't feel comfortable even going out in a park perhaps yet.
Megan and I found one of the things that like kind of blew our minds, and I don't know why they did, because looking back on it in hindsight, we should have been like, oh yeah, of course. People with disabilities, it's difficult to get around. The world is not built for them often when you have a mobility issue. Just think about like for me to go to Target, I hop in the car, I drive to Target, I get out of the car, I walk around. It's all very easy for me to navigate. Someone who uses a wheelchair, there's extra layers of challenge. Someone who has low sight or is blind, extra layers of challenge. And so going out is not just as easy as it would be for the rest of us. So we found that when we started moving towards a hybrid model of programming, I did the calculation just yesterday for a grant application. Our attendance increased by 400% because people were able to access things so much more easily. So we went from having maybe like 10 to 15 people come to a Real Abilities film festival screening to having close to 100 to 200 people register for that same event and then attend the talk back afterwards. And it's just because it's so much easier than having, and, you know, from a personal standpoint, as someone who has, you know, children and a full-time job and volunteer commitments, it's so much easier, and I'm so much more willing to sort of hang out and watch something virtually than I am to come home, change my clothes, go back out of the house, find childcare, all of those other things that can make just day-to-day stuff more difficult. Oh, that's a really interesting note, Diane. The suggestion of camelbacking for hashtags also has applications for websites to use caps at the beginnings of the words for people to be able to access it better. Yeah, that's a really great note, and something I think we could probably add and mention in this presentation going forward. We will often spell web addresses, again, for accessibility best practices, and not make the assumption that someone can easily read what is on the screen. So like in our contact slide right here, we would say Molly, Executive Director, email address MOLLY@artpossible.ohio.org. It's an added amount of time. It's a little bit awkward, but it can really help people who might have some difficulty. Any other questions?
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
You guys talked a little bit about hybrid events, and I'm wondering, do you have any advice for, say you do have some people who attend in person and then you have others who are tuning in online. Do you have advice for how you can kind of bridge that gap that's there and make those who are joining online really feel like they're part of the event and part of the conversation?
Yeah, I would say make them a part of the event. So if at all possible, have their image or their name visible to whoever is presenting, so that if it is a situation where you're calling on people or asking for group interaction, you can call on their names just like you would anyone who is physically in the room. You're always going to, it's always a balance. So you are going to lose some of that that magic or connection that happens with an in-person interaction. And that's just sort of like the way that it is. So, and this sort of ties into what Susie is saying, that like sometimes there's a loss of the quality of a performance. It's that same discussion you have in a museum, like the difference between a printout of an artwork or projection of an artwork versus being in the presence of the actual artwork. It's different. But it's also the type of situation where if it's the difference between, you know, being exposed to COVID or not being exposed to COVID, when COVID could cause you real problems or possibly land you in the hospital, there are some compromises that end up being like necessary.
We also, like, when we did the hybrid concert, obviously we did that. People could go to the venue and they could enjoy it. But then I was also online for the entirety of the concert, commenting, interacting with people who were watching, liking their posts, just so that they knew I was there and that we were like excited for them to be engaging with the concert. So making sure that you do that, whether it's a presenter, a webinar, something like that, making sure someone is there to take questions from Facebook or wherever you're streaming it, on YouTube or something, and make sure that the presenter gets those questions or hears those comments as another way that you can kind of pull it together.
And then are there recommendations or resources for the technical aspects of hybrid events? We are looking at our options for board meetings restarting in the fall And then Margaret has kind of a similar question. Does anyone have suggestions for technology as in an interactive TV that would allow virtual participants to interact best with in-person participants? I will say conference call does not do it. And that relates to both questions. Like when we've had board meetings where some people are in person and some people are remote, the conference call doesn't work. I think it's always better to have a video conference as opposed to just a like phone call conference, because then you can actually see people's faces and sort of gauge their reactions, and they feel like they're more present in the situation. I have found, I like Zoom, Zoom, Teams, FaceTime, all of them are about comparable. Zoom was a little bit of a bummer at the beginning because it didn't have the same accessibility things embedded in it. So we would have to layer on things like Otter or Rev in order to get closed captioning, because closed captioning was behind a paywall, which is pretty problematic. I think of all of them, one of my favorites is Facebook Live. We use that one for our accessible expressions gallery walkthrough. And when you go back and look at it, it's that one to me is the one that almost feels the most real in a sense. Megan and I had a good time using using Facebook Live, and that's one where you can, it's really easy to just like invite a whole bunch of people to be involved. Mm-hmm. My past issue is managing microphones and speakers. Yeah, because it's, well, and the other thing that's really difficult too is with like a Zoom board meeting, there's like that really awkward, like, should I talk, should I not talk, when it's, which happens in person, but it's a little bit easier. Like you can read people's body language a little bit easier in person and get the sense like, oh, someone's gearing up to say something. And then as far as feedback issues, if you have more than one microphone, you have to separate them far enough so that you don't end up in a feedback loop. And that's something that you can sort of test. You sort of almost have to test that in the room at the time because every microphone's a little bit different.
I would reach out to other organizations similar to yours if that feedback issue and see like what equipment they're using and things like that, because they might be able to offer some advice and suggestions for equipment, because that, you know, everybody's doing different kinds of programs depending on what you offer. So
all right, we are coming up on our time here. This hour flew by. I've been taking copious notes as the events person here at the OAC. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to. I'm going to give one last call for questions for Megan and Molly. So if you have anything else you want to ask, go ahead and get it there in the chat. And I just wanted to remind everyone that if you missed any portion of this, we are recording it, and the recording will be available on our webinars page at oac.ohio.gov/webinars early next week at the latest. And we'll also be sending a follow-up email containing the slide deck and a link to everyone who registered today, so you can look for that too. Don't see any more questions coming in. Megan, Molly, did you have anything else that we didn't get to that you want to share, parting words?
I don't think so. I would challenge people to think about the virtual format as almost like an art form in itself, like experiment with it, play with it. Like Megan mentioned earlier, don't be afraid to have some failures and have some programs that are duds, because that's how we get to the really good stuff, is by figuring out what's the really bad stuff.
So true. Let's see. Oh, just thanks to all of you. Your discussion has been informative. The questions from participants also highlighted more aspects that could be considered. Grateful to all. Thank you, Robert. And so I think it looks like we don't have any more questions rolling in, and we do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I think that does it for today. I just wanted to say thank you again, Molly and Megan. This was incredibly informative. I like the thought that, you know, these things shouldn't be viewed as extras. They're necessities. They enhance your event, that you want to be accessible to all. And I think that's just a really important takeaway.
Thanks so much.
So, yeah, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye.